Claudia. Happy birthday. We're delighted that you're here on this occasion. And thank you, Arnie Milling. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends of the Wayside, good morning to you all. Thank you for being here on such a momentous day for the Wayside. 7 years ago, the Wayside was nearly broke. While there was no doubt that it was doing great things, its expenditures were far exceeding its revenue, its reserves were reaching a critical low, and its building was dilapidated and much of it was condemned. And I'm sure that when Graham Long started here in the latter part of 2004, there must have been times when he wondered whether he was going to be the pastor who turned the lights out for the final time, thus closing a chapter in Sydney's history which Ted Noffs had so audaciously and successfully opened. Now look at it. Wow. We're at the end of an $8.2 million building project, the results of which are before your eyes. It's all paid for, we have no debt, and while our operational reserve is not up to the level which we would like it to be, which is equivalent to 1 year's expenditure, it is still positive, and we're hopeful that we can rebuild it over the next year or so, especially now that our operational effectiveness is enhanced by the new building. For a charity which, despite its great work and reputation, is reliant on the continuing generosity of its supporters and funders, year in and year out, it's a huge achievement. The more so, seeing that we launched our fundraising efforts almost at the exact time that the global financial crisis hit. And it's hard enough asking people for money at the best of times, but it's particularly hard when they've just lost a bundle. Such an achievement would not have been possible without substantial help from a whole variety of sources, both government and private, and the commitment of a large number of individuals. There are many thank yous to be made. First and foremost, I want to thank both the Commonwealth and New South Wales governments, who contributed $3 million and $2 million respectively. Minister Pliberstik, had she been here, and I'm sure she will be here, I certainly wanted to thank her both for the Commonwealth's contribution, and I'll do so later, but I also wanted to thank her personally for her support and commitment to the Wayside over a very long period. And we're also indebted in particular to the Honourable Anthony Albanese, Minister for Infrastructure, who also provided enormous personal advocacy and also was a volunteer at the Wayside in his youth. At the state government level, excuse me, at the state government level, Minister Skinner, I want to thank you personally for the ongoing support the Wayside receives from your government and department. And I also want to acknowledge the support we received from the former state Labor government, and particularly want to thank Nathan Rees, who, when he was Premier, had the political courage to make the state government's $2 million commitment at a very early stage, which helped us build some real momentum and gain credibility. And I also want to acknowledge the advocacy and support we received from Neville Rand, Bernie Reardon and Sam Dastiari in that process. At the local government level, I want to acknowledge Lord Mayor Clover Moore's long-standing personal support for the Wayside, including funding granted to the Wayside via her Lord Mayor's Salary Trust, and also the City of Sydney's support throughout the building process and for Wayside's ongoing programs. Thank you, Clover. As well as the $5 million from government, we also managed to raise $3.2 million from private donors, of which there were many, but special thanks go to Dick Smith Investments, the Gonski Foundation, Lucy and Malcolm Turnbull, both dear friends of the Wayside, the Hunt Family Foundation, Susan and Mike Crivelli, and the Linda and Ian Martin Foundation, all of whom contributed over $250,000. And Graham Wood, John and Catherine Murray, the Nielsen Foundation, and Robert and Sue Maple Brown, all of whom contributed in excess of $100,000. There are also many, many others who played an important role, and because so many people have given so much, in whatever form best suits their circumstances and abilities, I'm somewhat reticent to name names. However, some do deserve special mention. First of all, our architect, Enverina Studio, and its principal, Tone Wheeler. Tone did an enormous amount of pro bono work developing the concept and designing the building, starting way back in the 1990s. And certainly he must have wondered whether it was all going to be in vain and whether it would eventually happen. So thank you, Tone. Clayton Utes, who did all the legal work associated with the building pro bono. EPM, our project manager, and especially Andrew Graham and Catherine Cuno. Our builders, Kellen Rigby for stage 1 and Fujin for stage 2, all of which contributed to a smooth process and quality outcome. Our building project control group, especially John Barraclough, Mark Garden, Robert McHugh and John Sherburn. Our building fundraising committee chaired by Mike Trevelli and including board member Colin Tate, fundraiser extraordinaire, and including Lucy Turnbull, Peter Hunt, the Honourable Sandra Norrie and Sheridan Lee. And also the board that I am particularly privileged to lead, but especially Jo Thorley. Jo has been on our board for about 7 years. She's an architect and project manager by profession and is passionate about the Wayside, having previously been a volunteer. She oversaw the entire project for us, notwithstanding the fact that she relocated to Perth with a real job in the middle of it all. Colin Tate, as I said, fundraiser extraordinaire. And I also want to acknowledge the contribution of Colin's company, Connexus Financial, in providing Wayside with exposure in their various publications and finance industry conferences. Mike Crevelli, for his untiring commitment in leading our fundraising efforts. Emma Murphy for her leadership in preparing the various submissions to government and overseeing the financial aspects. And also Bob Ellicott, Richard Wiley, and indeed also Richard's company, Ursa Clemenger, for all the work that they do for the Wayside. Brian Scullen, Doug Bishop, excuse me, Peter McGeorge, and former board members Madeline Dermatossian, who was also instrumental in our fundraising efforts, and Vernon Prowse and Doug Allen. Thanks also to our patron, Her Excellency Professor Marie Bashir, Governor of New South Wales, who could not be here today, but sends her apologies and best wishes, and to our ambassadors, Claudia Kavan, David Wenham and Indira Naidu. I could go on for a long time, there are many more, and please look at the list on the flyer that was probably on your chairs or has been handed out. But finally, I want to say a very special thank you to Reverend Graham Long. And also to the and also to the staff and volunteers of the Wayside. We could never have raised the money were it not for the respect that Graham and his team are held, the respect with which Graham and his team are held in the community at large. Under Graham's leadership, the rejuvenation and reinvigoration of the Wayside has been nothing short of extraordinary, and I commend him and thank him for that. And especially the way he has extended the reach of the Wayside message and mission via his weekly Inner Circle newsletter, which I know for a fact is widely read by some of our country's most prominent leaders and opinion formers. Last but not least, I want to thank all of our staff and volunteers and also our visitors for putting up with the terrible conditions they've had to endure during the building process. And I also especially want to thank Richard Vaughan for his personal efforts in managing and coordinating the whole process. Ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed a great day for the Wayside, and I'm sure you share my optimism about its future. Thank you all for being here and for your contributions towards getting us here. Now, at this point I was going to introduce Tanya, but she's not here still, so it is my great pleasure to introduce the Honourable Gillian Skinner, State Minister for Health and Minister representing the Premier, to address and officially commence the grand opening of the new Wayside Chapel.